The story opens up with our young protagonist named Rest Dine, and on the morning of his 18th birthday, his family name Dine was taken from him, and he was stripped of his status as the family's heir. However, after getting banished, instead of getting sad and sulking over it like a normal person would do, he was actually overjoyed, as he felt that he was truly free now. The only thought running in his mind was that now he won't have to inherit the Dine family nor the customs and rituals of high-ranking noble society, since he was sick of all those ties and obligations anyway. As he took his leave from his stepmother, his brother-in-law, Bergs, came up to him, and he seemed really sad. He apologized to him and blamed himself that he could not stop their mother, while Rest, on the other hand, had already known that his stepmother was scheming in all sorts of ways to make his younger stepbrother, Bergs, the next head of the Dine family, so there was nothing much he could do about it. And with that thought in mind, he simply smiled and assured him that he did not need to worry about that. As a matter of fact, he believed that this was actually good for him, because with this, he could finally break free from the suffocating aristocratic society. But still, Bergs felt bad, and he could not understand that, out of all places, why his mother kicked him to the undeveloped island Eldoba. He had thought that it would be her homeland, the Kale territory, even though that area was pretty remote, while Rest casually stated that that was just how much his stepmother disliked him. Since it had come to this, Bergs promised him that he would provide him a ship and a few attendants, and he appreciated that a lot. With that said, Rest noticed that his younger brother still seemed very sad, so with a smile on his face, he told him that he was a truly remarkable younger brother-in-law and assured him that he did not need to worry about him at all. Besides, he also felt that his younger brother was far more suited to be the next head instead of someone like himself. Bergs got a bit emotional, seeing how his brother was putting on a brave face in front of him, and he once again apologized to him for not being capable enough, while he, on the other hand, just stood there, thinking that it would have been even more troublesome if he was actually capable, because then he wouldn't be having his freedom like this. Later, he went back to his room, and when he entered, a group of maids and a butler had made a cake for him, and they all wished him a very happy birthday. He thanked them, and as they all sat together to eat, they asked him if he knew what kind of place the Eldoba Island was and where he was going to be stationed. The butler spoke up and offered to explain it to all of them. He briefed them that Eldoba Island was a sheer cliff of remote island, which was shrouded in ominous air. That's why even the kingdom had given up investigating it. The maids were shocked to hear that, while Rest was not worried about any of it at all and believed that he would be able to manage somehow. Besides, Bergs was also sending a few of his men with him, so there was that. Hearing that, the three maids also expressed that they wanted to go with him as well, and seeing how excited they were getting, it felt like they were all going on a school trip or something instead of being banished from the estate. Rest himself agreed that this was just like a field trip, and he had also borrowed the research documents the kingdom had gathered on the island. With that said, the preparations to go to the Eldoba Island began. The scene then shifted to the docks, and Rest had instructed some workers to load the tree and steel frame onto the ship, but since some of them were still left, he told them to just leave them around there, and the workers wondered what exactly he intended to do with things like these. Later at night, coming back to Rest, he thanked his butler Keda for everything that he had done for him and expressed how glad he was to see that they were all coming with him. There was no way Keda was going to leave him alone, as he mentioned that he had made a promise to his mother, Lady Eliza, that he would always protect him. Rest remembered that very well, and he recalled that he had also made a promise to his mother as well, and that was, he would never use his power recklessly. When he was little, she told him that his gift was an S-rank craft skill, and it was something that he must only use in times of true need, because someone might appear who would try to use that power for evil. He simply listened to her and agreed. Coming back to the present, he looked at Keda and wondered if this was one of those times of true need, to which he responded that it seems like it. The workers had already arranged the logs he had asked them to, and since no one was present there, he decided to get to work and started using them. The next morning, when the workers arrived, they were completely stunned to see that all the heavy logs had disappeared, and they had no idea what the hell happened there in the span of one night. Meanwhile, Rest and his group set sail for Eldoba Island, and it had been 3 days now since they left. The island was finally in their sight, and as soon as Rest saw that, he was absolutely amazed because of how high and massive it was, and he realized that it was just as Keda had told them. Berg's men were starting to get worried, and they wondered if people could really live in a place like that, while Rest, on the other hand, was extremely excited, since this was exactly the freedom he had been searching for all this time. Later, he, Keda, and the three maids finally set their foot on the island, and he could not wait to explore the entire island to see what it had to offer. In this world, gifts referred to a special power that was rarely bestowed upon people around the world. People believed that it was a gift which was granted to them by the gods themselves. However, the real truth was never understood well. Rest, who had been banished from his family on his 18th birthday, was one of the rare few among those who were blessed with special powers, and possessing an S-rank gift, he had been granted the craft skill. If the necessary resources or materials were prepared within the range of the gift's power, he had the ability that allowed him to create various things using that gift, and he demonstrated just that as he created an entire bridge in a matter of few seconds after arriving at the island. Keda praised him for his amazing work, and he thanked him back since it was his blueprint that he used. Apparently, his gift did not require him to craft things himself or even study the structure he was trying to make. His gift could automatically create things based on the blueprints that he reads with his hands. Terry also complimented him, saying that he possessed a truly amazing gift and that the peer must be delighted as well, while Agni and Fail were simply amazed to see how incredible and efficient his skill was. Rest, on the other hand, was starting to get a little shy, and he was just glad that his gift came in handy. With that said, he decided to reshape the cliff in front of them, and Keda had already prepared the blueprint for him. Using his skill, he created a big hole at the foot of the cliff, and it turned out that not only could he create things with his craft skill, but also erase things, and the maids were yet again surprised to see that his gift was not just limited to one ability. He himself was not really sure how all that worked, but he guessed that this was more like a secondary effect of his gift. By holding out his hand, he could absorb any object at will, and he did exactly that as he absorbed the rocks to hollow out the cliff and make a cave. Fail asked him what happened to the rocks that he absorbed, and he explained that he could store them inside himself as materials, which he could use later. With that out of the way, they entered the cave, and he started transforming it into a place where they could live temporarily. The maids had prepared sandwiches and soup, and they asked him and Keda to take a break and eat something first. They both agreed, and they all sat together to eat their meal. Fail noticed that Rest was removing pickles from his sandwiches, and she pointed it out, asking him why he was doing that, while he requested her to be quiet about it. However, Agni had already heard that, and she said to him that a lord like him should not be picky with his food. He apologized but also argued that food preferences had nothing to do with developing the territory, and she simply responded that it was her duty to manage his nutrition. Understanding that she wouldn't be backing down, he stopped arguing and ate it, even though he clearly did not like it. Terry then asked him if she could get some fresh water in there, as she wanted to clean the dishes, and he actually created water and stored it in a pot for her. Confused, Agni asked him if he was actually storing up seawater, and he explained to her that he had been secretly drawing water from the Dine family's well every day. She was really shocked to hear that, and she asked him if there was really no limit to how much he could store, and more importantly, wouldn't it all get mixed together with the other stored items, to which he answered that he could actually store materials endlessly, and there was no limit to it. He assured them that they wouldn't have to worry about water for a while, so they could just relax now. Since that was the case, she asked him if she could take a bath as well, and he told her she could. The next morning, as they moved forward inside the cave, they reached a dead end, and he informed them all that if they hollowed out this area, they could finally get inside the island. All of them were very excited to get out of there, and Fail asked him what kind of shape their next house would have. He asked her back what kind of a house she wanted to have, and the image that she had in her mind was of a big mansion. With that said, he used his gift to absorb the rocks in front of him, and they finally made it outside of the cave. As they all arrived outside, they were surprised to see how many trees there were. But then, as they continued to move forward, Terry pointed out that it was quite strange that they could not hear any birds singing, even in such a dense forest, and Rest agreed with her, wondering if there really wasn't anyone else on this island besides them. Keda mentioned that it was not recorded in the expedition team's logs either. However, since the investigation had been cut off since a long time ago, they could not truly rely on it either. Whatever the case, Rest decided they would just look into it themselves. But first, they needed to clear out the trees to make a path for the carriage. They continued moving forward, and after a while, they reached a point where they saw a house that had been broken down completely. From the looks of it, Keda guessed that it might be a site that was built by the investigation team and believed that they might be able to find something if they searched it thoroughly. Rest decided to help him out as well while the maids went ahead to prepare a meal. As they started searching through the house, Keda could tell that it had been thoroughly ravaged by the beasts. And if that was the case, he suggested that all of them should stay on their guard. During their search, the two of them came across a door, but it was locked, and Rest guessed that it must have been the captain's room. Keda believed that they might be able to find some investigation documents in there, since the reason why the Enhanced Kingdom abandoned its explorations was because of the Gald Empire's surprise war. That's why there was a possibility that there may still be untouched investigation material behind that door. Since that was the case, Rest considered absorbing the whole door with his craft skill. However, he also understood that it was quite risky because with that, there was also the chance that he might absorb the room's documents as well. So he took a closer look at the door handle and decided to just make a key instead, which he was able to do quite easily, and he unlocked the door. Seeing how smooth he was with it, Keda questioned him when did he learn to do something so thievish, and he explained to him that he had learned to do it at school, where they used the same kinds of locks as well. As for the reason why he did that, he promised that he would tell him some other time. For now, they both entered the room, and they noticed that most of the stuff from the bookshelf had been taken as well. Still, they kept on searching, and they found a notebook that was stuck in a drawer. They went back outside and informed the maids that the notebook mentioned the investigation details and the possibility that natives were also present on this island. Since that was the case, Keda suggested they should start looking for the natives and greet them. But then, Agni pointed out that that part of the text had a strike-through on it. Rest agreed that she was right, and apparently, the official survey did not mention any natives, which made him wonder if the expedition mistook something for them and then crossed it out. Keda also added that according to the survey team's report, there were no traces of anyone having landed on this island before, but ultimately, in the end, the survey team could not figure anything about the natives either. Fail then requested him to let her take a look at the notebook, and he gave it to her, while Keda stated that just to be safe, they should proceed on the assumption that someone else besides them was here on this island as well. Fail was analyzing the notebook in her own way, and she pointed out that there was a page in it which felt kind of bumpy. Rest guessed that it might be because of the writing marks, and with that, he wondered if they could use that to figure out what was on the torn-out page. He took a pencil and started scratching on it to highlight the words, and it actually worked. He could only make out a couple of random words, and it said something about a spring deep in the forest, a figure riding a monster, and an elf. As soon as Fail heard about an elf, she got really excited and wanted to be friends with them, while Terry and Agni questioned her if she was sure about that since there was no certainty if they could even understand each other, to which she simply replied that even if they could not understand each other, if they shared her favorite sweets, she was sure they would be good friends. Rest agreed with her and said that he would like that as well, but then Keda went up to him and asked him what he was talking about. Rest whispered to him that he was saying that just for the sake of it, and besides, he did not want to give any of them unnecessary worries. With that said, the maids began setting up the plates for lunch, while he and Keda discussed among themselves that if elves were really present on the island, then there was no way they would overlook the humans who were developing the forest. Rest recalled that the elves made their homes in the forest, wielded magic that was far greater than humans, and were very proud beings. He had even heard that the kingdom was having trouble negotiating with the elves. He just hoped that the reason the survey team abandoned their investigation of the island was not because of the elves. Whatever the case, Keda decided to keep an eye on the forest and their surroundings while Rest tried to figure out what more was written in the notebook. Later on, Rest had created a huge mansion for themselves using his craft skill, and he transformed the ruins of the forest into a beautiful house, which left everyone completely amazed. With that, they did not need to worry about the rain anymore, and from there on out, he and his little family could finally spend time together comfortably. Keda's room was full of books, just like a library, while Terry's room came with a walk-in closet that could store plenty of dresses. Fail's room was a playful secret base with an attic, obviously. And as for Agni's room, there lay countless adorable stuffed animals that Rest had personally crafted for her with his skill, and that surprised her a lot. He and Fail enjoyed the fact that they could finally give her a surprise, and although she kept denying it, saying that it was not that cute, she clearly liked it as well. The maids were simply glad to finally have a home-like place, because with this, cooking would go more smoothly, and they all thanked Rest for it. He then turned to Keda and asked him what their next move was going to be. In making everyone's personal rooms this time, he had ended up using a bunch of materials like cotton and linen, and since that was the case, the butler suggested that they should head to the nearby town by ship to stock up on basic materials. They had already received a decent amount of funds from the Dine family, but still, Rest understood that they must use it wisely, otherwise they would run out of it quickly. With that said, he also mentioned that they should try to find something from this land that they could use for trade, and Keda agreed with him. But first, they all sat together to have dinner. Rest did his prayers before eating the food like always, and he thanked everyone at the table for going along with it, since this was something that his mother used to do a lot, and it was basically a whole custom for him now. Terry understood that completely, and she also added that his mother, Lady Eliza, would be very glad to see that the traditions of the Kale domain were still being carried on. Agni found the custom quite wonderful because they were being thankful for the food that was on their table, and she aimed that straight towards Rest, reminding him that he should actually follow it as well and make sure to finish everything without wasting anything. That included the pickles as well. After finishing the dinner, he went back to his room and slept for the night. The next morning, he looked outside the window and admired what nice weather it was out there. Just then, he noticed something moving in the bushes, and a big furry creature appeared, which left him completely stunned. He immediately gathered everyone, and when they asked him why he had called them so urgently, he informed them that he saw a huge furball moving outside their mansion. He guessed that it might be one of those unique monsters of this island that were mentioned in the survey report. But then he noticed that there were actually a couple of furballs just like that right on top of Fail's head, and he asked them what the hell they were doing carrying those creatures on her head like that. The maids briefed him that they had found these little things outside this morning when they were doing laundry, and they were nothing to be scared of, as they were merely a group of birds, and they were wondering if they had gotten lost or something. All of a sudden, they heard a loud noise from outside, and Rest was certain that it must be the furball monster he saw in the morning. Keda brought up that he had actually heard that cry back in his adventuring days, and he knew exactly who it belonged to. It was a cockatrice, a greedy chicken with sharp claws, and their appearance was quite unheard of. However, judging from its cry, it was most probably searching for its chicks, so they decided to help it, and they returned the 3 chicks back to the parent bird, or at least that's what they all thought. But turns out, the birds never went back, and for some reason they all just settled down in the carriage house. Seeing how the parent bird was acting, Rest could not help but feel like it was trying to hide from something, and Keda also agreed that that did seem to be the case. He did not have a good feeling about this, so he requested Rest to evacuate everyone into the mansion, just to be safe. Turns out his gut feeling was indeed right, as a giant wolf was approaching the mansion. The wolf let out a loud howl, and Rest wondered if it was chasing after the cockatrice. But whatever the case, defense came first, and he decided to use his craft to make a cage. Meanwhile, Keda asked him to stay back and let him take care of this since the opponent was a giant wolf. However, as the wolf came closer, he seemed rather chill and was not even trying to attack them, which left both of them a bit confused, and they noticed that it was looking a little weakened. Turns out, the wolf was carrying an injured child with it and wanted their help to save the child. Rest immediately crafted a medical room, and the maids began taking care of him. Upon examining the kid, Terry informed Rest that there were not any major external injuries on him, and so she needed to examine him a bit more carefully to understand what had happened to him. She also pointed out that the stitching on his clothes was quite fine, and they had very high-quality fabric, while Fail noticed that the boy had pointed ears, which confirmed that he was indeed an elf. She asked if anyone in the room knew how to understand Elvish, and Rest recalled that Keda knew a lot about that kind of literature, which he confirmed that he does, but only just a little, and he could read Elvish. Agni offered to make some soup for the boy because of how weak he seemed. Just then the kid woke up, and the first thing he saw was a bunch of people just staring at him with sparkling eyes. That really startled him for a moment, and the rest of them apologized to him for scaring him like that, but they were not sure if their words were even reaching him in the first place. However, to their surprise, the kid talked in their language as well and asked them if they knew where Fackley was. Rest figured that he must be talking about the wolf from earlier and assured him that he was fine and was right outside, eating food. He then introduced himself to him as the temporary lord of this island and asked him if he would like to tell them about himself. The boy also introduced himself as Koritoko and explained to them that he had accidentally stepped on a slate of flower that grew outside his village. There was a well-known legend which said that if anyone steps on that flower, it places a curse on them that makes them unable to use magic. That's exactly what happened to him as well, and as a result, his body was turning black, starting from his hands. Seeing that, Keda brought up that unlike humans, elves live by magic, and therefore them losing their magic was a very serious problem. Koritoko further added that the curse was said to spread to anyone who comes near, and to protect his father and the others in his village, he just ran away from there. Rest had never heard about such a curse, nor did he study anything about it at school, and considering how the curse was being activated, Terry wondered if it was the pollen that was affecting this. Keda agreed that that could very much be possible, and this curse might actually be just an allergy. Rest requested Terry to examine this more closely, and she agreed to do that. Fail asked her if she really had that much understanding of illnesses, and she told her that she had been researching a lot for Lady Eliz's illness, and because of that, she had gained quite some knowledge in that subject. She promised to give them the results by evening, and in the evening she finally informed them that their guess was indeed right. This curse was nothing but an allergy that was caused by the pollen of the Slada flower. It was a rare flower that only strongly affected the Elds, while for the humans, it was nothing more than a few sneezes. Since that was the case, Fail asked her if there was any medicine that could cure this allergy, but unfortunately, she did not have any medicine with her as of right now. However, there were some prescription recipes that were written in the medical book, so all they needed to do was just find the right herbs. Rest took a look at that book and the recipe that was written in it, and using his crafting skill, he absorbed the entire list of herbs in his mind. Using that list as a blueprint, he was able to create the herbs, and he asked Terry if they were right. She confirmed that those were precisely the ones she wanted, and she decided to go ahead and make the cure right away. Meanwhile, Agni gave Koritoko the soup that she had prepared for him and asked him if it suited his taste. He told her that it was very delicious and thanked her for making it for him. He had no idea that there was such a big house in a place like this, and that really surprised him. Fail and Agni briefed him that they had actually arrived there just recently. They then asked him if there were other Elds living in the village where he came from, and he explained to them that the village from where he came from was, in fact, a half-elf village, and he himself was actually half-human and half-elf. Fail brought up that Agni was just like him as well, and she confirmed that she was also a half-breed with beast folk. With that said, they both informed him that it would still take some time before the medicine was ready for him, and they asked him if there was anything else he wanted to eat. Fail began talking to herself, saying that Agni's chiffon cake was really delicious, and hearing that, Koritoko requested if he could get some as well, and she agreed to make that. But to make that she needed eggs, and while they were on that topic, she pointed out that they had not really seen any birds flying around this island, which was quite strange, but she decided not to think about it for now and decided to ask Rest for the eggs. Just like that, a few days passed, and Koritoko was back on his feet, cheerfully playing with his wolf. The rest of them were happy to see that Terry's special medicine worked like a charm, but then all of a sudden, they heard someone shouting. Turns out it was Agni, and when they asked her what had happened, she told them that the birds were still not warming up to her, which was starting to make her really sad. Rest reminded her that despite its looks, it was still a monster and suggested to her that she should not try to provoke it that much, but she, on the other hand, just wanted to bury herself in that fluffy fur of those birds. Koritoko then offered to teach her how to befriend them, and he called those creatures cockabird. That was the first time Rest was hearing that, and the boy briefed him that in his village, his people call a subspecies of cockatrice by that name, and on top of that, he also added that with cockabirds, they could get eggs quite easily, which left the rest of them a bit confused. Later on, Rest proceeded to build the chicken coop that Koritoko had asked from him, and Keda, like always, had already prepared the blueprints for him based on what Koritoko said. He did not want it to be made purely out of rocks, because then that way, the birds might begin to dislike it and stop laying eggs. With that in mind, Rest went ahead and began building the chicken coop for the birds. Later, Agni finished making the cake, and Koritoko absolutely loved it. Keda was still surprised, as he had never thought that just like cockatrices, cockabirds would also carefully tend to the fertilized eggs and just toss the unfertilized ones from the nest, while Terry stated that with this, they had now gotten a valuable source of protein. Fail also stated that the eggs were quite big, as they were almost the size of Rest's head, and he further mentioned that now that they had the birds with them, they wouldn't have to worry for food for a while. With that said, he came back to Koritoko and guessed that his parents must be worrying sick for him, so he decided to take him back to his village, and plus, since they were now living on the same island, he wanted to greet his people as the Lord. The maids began wondering what they should give to him as a gift, while Rest also added that he would be sending some special medicine that was made from the Slada flower, and he was certain that they would be very useful for them. Seeing all those generous gestures, Koritoko got a little emotional, and he thanked all of them from the bottom of his heart. Terry patted him on the head, trying to calm him down, and assured him that he did not need to worry about all this stuff. With that said, the four of them decided to head to his village first thing in the morning. The next morning, Rest held a magic stone in his hand, and was trying to do something with it when Terry went up to him and asked him what he was doing. He told her that he was testing whether he could store magic stones or not, since magic stones could be used as an energy source for lighting and such. so that's why he was thinking that it would be nice if he could carry some of it with them. Just then, before he could complete, Terry noticed that he was also holding Eliz's clock, and that really brought back some nice memories. He explained to her that on their way to Company Koritoko, if the clock runs out of magic, it would be somewhat of a problem, and that's why he was trying to find a solution for that as well. But putting that aside, he asked her if the preparations for their departure were going smoothly, and she informed him that they were ready to head out any time. He was glad to hear that, and he also mentioned that since they had already checked the direction of the spring from the tower, all they needed to do now was just reach the spring, because from there on out, Koritoko said he knew the way back to his village. With that said, he also began contemplating that in those expedition notes that he got earlier, it mentioned something about a figure riding a monster and an elf child. He guessed that it must be talking about Koritoko and his wolf, and as for the spring deep in the forest, it must be referring to the area near Koritoko's village. However, the notes did not mention any village, so he speculated that it must be a bit farther away. Just then, Keda came up to him and advised him that it would be better if just the two of them accompany Koritoko, while the maid stayed behind. The reason being, there were monsters on this island that were strong enough to destroy the expedition's buildings, and they had already seen that firsthand. Hence, the road ahead was going to be very dangerous. But then Koritoko spoke up and told them that there were not any monsters present in the area. As a matter of fact, it was quite safe because the holy beast drives away the dangerous monsters that live in this forest. He explained to them that the holy beast was a being that watched over this entire forest to make sure that no one harms it, and they even come to the spring shrine quite often, which is why everyone in the village makes offerings for them from time to time. Hearing that, Rest nervously chuckled and thought to himself what this holy beast would think of him, since he had already cut down quite a bit of the forest with his craft. Keda decided to believe him, and if there really was a holy beast watching over them, then there was nothing to worry about. He went ahead to take care of the cockabirds while also looking through the records left by the survey team, and as for Rest protection, he gave that role to Fail and others, since they had martial training. Speaking of which, Agni was out there still trying to befriend the cockabirds, since she liked fluffy things a lot, but wasn't really making any progress. Rest went up to her and told her that she should not force herself to take care of the birds. She felt really embarrassed and stated that she could not be of service as his bodyguard, and that's why at the very least she wanted to be of use by taming these little birds. But then he requested her to come along with him, since he wanted to have her meals on the way, and she could not turn him down, so she agreed to tag along. Keda made Fail the leader and asked her to look after both Rest and Agni, and she was already pumped up to show the results of her martial training, and thus, the group finally set out towards the deep forest. As they were on their way, Fail and Agni noticed something deep into the woods, so they both decided to go ahead and check it out by themselves first. A few moments later, Rest, who was sleeping in the carriage, woke up and he asked Terry where Agni and Fail were, to which she answered that she had not seen them around herself. Just then, Koritoko came in and said that he could smell the two of them just a little further. Meanwhile, Fail and Agni had stumbled upon a beautiful spring, and after coming all the way out there, Fail asked her if she knew the way back. She assured her that she did not need to worry because her nose was sharper than most people's, and she could still tell which way they needed to go to make it back. But then suddenly she smelled something really bad, and it was a really unpleasant beastly stench that reminded her of monsters. Nonetheless, she decided to check out where it was coming from, and seeing how she was acting, Fail was not really sure if they should go near it. Just then she noticed a shadow moving in the bushes from the corner of her eye, but she was not sure, and she wondered if there was actually something in the bushes. Suddenly, Agni started feeling exhausted, and she wanted to rest for a bit, while Fail could not even begin to understand what exactly was going on with her. Later, when Agni woke up, she thanked her for looking after her when she went ahead and slept in the middle of nowhere. She shared with her that she just wanted to tame the cockabirds so that she could be of help to Rest, and Fail asked her wasn't she doing it just because she wanted to be friends with those cute fluffy creatures. She admitted that that was also a part of it, but mainly she just wanted to be useful to Rest. Fail assured her she did not need to worry about such things because she was already very reliable, and her cooking was also very delicious. She believed that she was already amazing enough. However, she, on the other hand, pointed out that she was not skilled in martial arts like her, and because of that, she could not properly protect him when it really matters, even though she was half beast skin. She actually had an older brother who was conducting espionage in the Dine household, and the two of them were hired together for the special physical abilities that half-beast skin were known to possess. However, she was clumsy and a burden, and it would not have been a surprise if she was cast out from the mansion a long time ago. But that's when Eliza praised her hobby of cooking and said that it was very delicious. Because of her, she was able to serve as a maid. Hearing all that, Fail was certain that she would eventually be able to get along with the cockabirds as well, even if it takes time. Just then, they heard something, which startled her a bit, and she began wondering if it really was a monster in the bushes. Rest and the others arrived on the scene as well and asked them if they were all right, but then all of a sudden something came running towards them, and it turns out it was indeed a monster, a horse-like beast with a horn. Rest remembered that a long time ago he had heard from Keda about these creatures. The monster in front of him was called a unicorn, and it was obedient to pure maidens, but to anyone else, it was nothing more than a violent beast. It was even said that every year many people lost their lives because of its rampage. Hence, he understood that this situation was really bad, and he tried to think of something to get out of there, but then Koritoko stopped him and told him that it was actually the holy beast. Confused, Rest turned to him and asked him if he was sure that this unicorn was the holy beast when suddenly, the beast started talking and told him that he was not a unicorn, but a unicorn. That just left Rest even more shocked, as he could not believe that the beast was actually able to speak, while he further stated that the so-called unicorns do not understand anything in the first place. They deny every possibility that lies ahead just because one was not a maiden, and they even go as far as to seek lives. He believed that even if they are not pure maidens, if love could be felt, then that was more than enough. If there were 2 or more women together, that was even better, and was enough to fuel his imagination, and he asked Rest if he agreed with him as well. However, he and the others just stood there, confused, trying to figure out what the hell he was even talking about. The beast then looked at Fail, and he recognized him as the one who was watching over both of them earlier, and hearing that, Tyrene began teasing him, asking him if he was peeking at Fail and the others, to which he nervously answered that he was not such a vulgar being at all. Meanwhile, Rest still could not believe that the sacred beasts were able to talk, that too in their language, and Koritoko also agreed that he was surprised to see that the holy beast could talk as well. But what was even more shocking to him was the fact that the holy beast was looking at women like that all this time, and that had really disappointed him. The holy beast recognized him as well as the boy from the elf village, and he requested him if he could keep this whole thing a secret from the villagers. Otherwise, his entire mystique would crumble down in an instant, and he did not want that after being revered as a holy creature for such a very long time. Rest just casually commented from behind that, rather than being a mysterious being, he felt more like a chatty being. The unicorn agreed that he was not wrong on that, and as a matter of fact, it was a bad habit of his. Once he started talking, he just could not stop himself, and that's why, when villagers approached, he only pretended to be a regular horse and deliberately kept his distance. Fail was already starting to feel tired, as she realized that they might be in for a long story, and he once again apologized to them, clarifying that it had just been so long since he had a proper conversation with anyone. Hearing that, Fail asked him what he meant by a very long time, and he shared with them that long ago, this whole area used to be overrun with monsters. He used to keep chatting with them every time he saw them, but then, before he even realized, no one dared to come near that area anymore. To put it in simple words, Rest asked him if the monsters were staying away from this forest because he was being annoyingly persistent with them instead of because of some kind of holy power that he possessed, and he confirmed that that was indeed the case. Obviously, he wanted to talk with the villagers as well, and a long time ago, he had actually once tried to speak to them. At that time, when he approached the villagers, all the women came running over to him at once, and at that moment, he felt like it was the peak of his popularity. However, back then, what the women said to him broke his heart. They said that he was reeking of a foul stench, and Agni completely agreed with that as well. Seeing how she was also feeling the same way, he got really depressed and decided to just take his leave and never approach people again, only watch and protect them from afar like he always had. But then, Koritoko stopped him and told him that he, for once, actually wanted to talk to him since he was finally able to meet him. And that really surprised the unicorn. He wanted to hear a lot more stories from him, and since he also knew about the village's past, he invited him to come to the village with him and tell those stories to everyone as well. The unicorn was not too sure about that, as he understood that his smell was indeed foul. However, Koritoko assured him that it was not a big deal, and looking at Agni and Fail, he requested them to just bear with it for a while. Rest wondered if washing him would get rid of that smell, and so they decided to test that out, and they took him near the river. The maids surrounded him and asked him if he was ready to get his body washed, while he, on the other hand, was getting really flustered just thinking that such beautiful women would be touching his body. He was scared that their pure bodies may well be defiled because of him, but at the same time he also knew that such a chance would never come again. While he was thinking all that, Rest came up from behind with a big brush and surprised him, as it was him who was going to give him a bath. After he was done, the unicorn looked way better than before. However, even though the stronger odor had faded a little, they still could not completely get rid of the beastly smell itself, and he was still stinking a little. Terry suggested that they could use some perfume to mask the beastly scent, and Rest also thought that that just might work. She asked the holy beast if he would like to try a gourmand type that girls might love, and of course, as soon as he heard that, he wanted to give it a try just because women might prefer it. She did not have the perfume with her right now. However, she did know the ingredients that were used to make it, so she wanted Rest's help to craft it. She showed him the pictures of all the herbs, and he already had gathered most of it back when they first arrived on this island. It was just the Severia flower that he did not possess, and he asked her what kind of flower it was and how it looked. She drew it up for him, but her art was so amazing, it caught him completely by surprise, and he had no idea what the hell she had drawn. It was so bad, he believed that it could even shatter someone's mind if he showed it around to random people. Still, he tried to use it as a blueprint and activated his crafting skill, but he could not create anything because he was not able to grasp what it was and understand the drawing. Seeing their struggle, the unicorn turned to Terry and asked her to hold his horn. That left her quite confused, and Agni, with an intimidating look on her face, questioned him what he was thinking in that head of his and advised him that he should not suddenly expose his wild fetishes like that. He clarified that that was not what he meant by it at all and explained to them that whenever someone touches his horn, he could see what that person was thinking. So in other words, if he could know what the Severia flower looked like, he believed that he might be able to have an idea where its colony was. Since that was the case, Rest was excited to try it out and wanted to touch it. But the beast stopped him right there and told him that a man must not touch it at all. Fail was also quite excited to try it out, so she grabbed his horn and asked him if he could see what she was thinking about. He told her that she was imagining sweets and Agni's chiffon cake, and Fail confirmed that he was indeed right. Now that he had proven that it does actually work, Terry agreed to try it out as well, but before that, she gently said to him that he was not allowed to read any other thoughts in her mind other than flowers, as a woman's secret must always be kept. With that said, she held his horn and was very surprised to see how warm it was. The unicorn seemed to be enjoying her hand a lot and told her that she was free to grip it harder and even squeeze it tight. She took him up on that offer, and as soon as she did, he started making weird noises. A few moments later, after having the time of his life, he informed them that the flower they were searching for grew in a cave which was just nearby. Later, the group finally made their way to the cave that the holy beast was talking about, and Koritoko recognized that area. This was his first time coming so close since he was always told that he should never go near that place, and Terry could understand why, because the scent of Severia flowers could make anyone drowsy if they accidentally inhaled too much of it. Hearing that, the unicorn added that that must be why he always felt strangely at ease whenever he was resting in there, and since that was the case, Rest decided that only the three of them adults would go inside to gather the flower. He, Terry, and Agni stepped inside the cave, and in there, they were finally able to find the flower that they were looking for. They could not believe that such a beautiful flower field existed on an island like this, and Rest wished Keda could have seen this sight as well. Agni suggested that they could just pick a few flowers and take them back to show him. On top of that, she had this idea that if they decorated the table with this, it would look very bright and cheerful. Terry agreed that it was quite a wonderful idea and was sure that Keda would like it as well. With that said, Rest decided to collect some extra flowers using his craft skill, just enough not to ruin the scenery. Suddenly, they felt some shaking, and he wondered if it was an earthquake, but then, all of a sudden, they heard someone screaming out for help. The three of them speculated that it could be someone from Koritoko's village, but whatever the case, he decided to check it out himself since he had the craft skill, and he told both of them to go back the way they came from to be safe. As he followed the girl's screams, he finally arrived at the source where there was a little girl hanging from a cliff. Her strength gave in, and she started falling down, but luckily Rest had arrived there just in time, and using his gift, he created a giant rock arm to catch her midair and save her from falling to her death. As she landed, she was a bit confused and did not understand what just happened and how the ground changed shape, but then Rest called out to her and asked her if she was fine. He brought her back down, and he was glad to see that she was safe, while she realized that it was him who just saved her. He put forward his hand, introducing himself to her, and she did the same, introducing herself as Astoria. Later, the two of them finally made it outside the cave, and as soon as she saw Koritoko there, she ran up to him and hugged him, telling him that she had been searching for him all this time. He explained to her big sis that he was cursed by the Sleeta flower, and that's why he had to run away. However, Rest saved him, and he was completely fine now. With the reunions out of the way, Rest was finally able to craft the perfume Terry was asking for, and they applied it on the holy beast. To their surprise, it actually worked, and the filthy smell was completely gone now. The unicorn was extremely thankful to all of them, and with that he hoped that the women's gaze might get a little different than usual. However, Agni then pointed out that he wouldn't be able to use this perfume forever, and he admitted that she did have a point. Koritoko then suggested that they should take him back to the village and ask everyone there, as he was sure that they would all want to help care for the holy beast. Astoria also agreed that it was a good idea and stated that it would be an honor for all of them to be able to take care of him. Hearing that, the unicorn got a little emotional and asked them if they were sure about accepting him, to which they replied that they would be happy to. With that decided, the two elves guided all of them back to their village, the Utero village. They met up with the village chief, who was surprised to see the holy beast after so long, and he could not even remember when was the last time they both met. The beast mentioned that it was back when he was still just a young man, while Rest asked the chief if he had known that the holy beast could talk, and he simply nodded. After they were done exchanging greetings, Rest and his group borrowed the square to prepare a medicine that worked against the curse of the Sleeta flower, and at first, everyone was shocked to hear that the curse could actually be cured. But they accepted him and even decided that with this, they could expand their hunting grounds as well. They all thanked him for helping them out, and he was just glad that he could be of use to all of them. Furthermore, he assured them that if they ever ran into trouble, he would always be there for them. Koritoko also got reunited with his father, who was very happy to see that his son was alright, and witnessing all that, Rest was simply glad that both the holy beast and Koritoko were being properly welcomed back instead of being looked down upon. He began to wonder if someday there would come a day where he would also have to face his father, but while he was thinking about that, Agni called him out and asked him if this whole island was actually his home now. Hearing that from her, he just started laughing, and when she asked him what was so funny about it, he answered that she was starting to sound kind of like Keda. But jokes aside, he understood that now that this whole island was his home, he would have to fulfill his duties as the lord of this island, and to do that, he decided to first talk with the people of this village. Just then, Astoria came running to him and told him that she had prepared a special meal for him as a thank you for helping her out in the cave, and she requested him to join her. He, on the other hand, was surprised to see that she had different ears than what he had imagined, and he just stood there confused. She explained to him that she was actually part of the beastkin race, thus the bunny ears, but still it did not make sense to him since he had guessed that she and Koritoko were siblings, and she told him that she just happened to be washed ashore on this island, and the people of this village kindly helped her out. Koritoko's family treated her especially well, and that's why she called him her little brother. Rest asked her from which country she had come from, and she answered that she was from the Goro Empire, which was in the Beastkin Nation. As a matter of fact, she was the Empire's third princess. However, she broke off the engagement and ran away. It was just another political marriage, and Rest recalled that that was quite a typical story among nobles. She further stated that she wanted to fall in love freely and marry for herself, and he completely understood, as he shared with her that he had come there seeking freedom as well. Suddenly, Astoria grabbed his hand, and out of nowhere she requested him to marry her, and he just stood there with a blank expression, not knowing what to make of it. Before he could respond, all of a sudden, another half-beast named Van came running to him from behind, holding a sword in his hand, and he was pissed that an unknown man was laying his hands on his sister. Astoria tried to stop him, but he refused to listen, and he straight up challenged Rest to a duel to settle this matter. He wanted to see if he was truly a worthy match for his sister because in the country where they came from, only the strong could get married. But then, Fail stepped up, and she was not going to allow a random nobody like him to challenge her young lord. Instead, she decided to take him to Rest's place. Van looked down on her and warned her that she should be prepared to get hurt, while the others tried to stop her as well, telling her that there was no need for her to do that. But she did not listen and told Van that if he wanted to surrender, then now was his chance because after this, she was going to beat him to a pulp, and he did not back down either. With that, the duel began, and then a few moments later, Van laid on the ground, utterly defeated, while Fail did not have even a single scratch and said that it was a very easy win. Even Agni grew worried for Van and told her that she should learn how to hold back a little. When Van woke up, he had no clue what just happened to him because of how quick it was, and Fail continued to rub it in his face, saying that she already told him he should not do it. Apparently, she was the only disciple to have been taught numerous martial arts by Keda, and when in hand-to-hand combat against others, there was absolutely no one who could defeat her, at least in terms of strength. Still, she was not completely arrogant, and she offered him her hand, asking him if he could stand up, but then, all of a sudden, he got on his knees in front of her and asked her to marry him, which left her completely confused. That alone was enough to prove that he and Astoria were indeed siblings. Later, they all got together at Astoria's house to eat the meal she had specially prepared for them, and she started off by apologizing to Rest for startling him as she admitted that her feelings just got ahead of her. He accepted her apology, and although it did catch him off guard, he did not mind that, while Van said to him that he did not want to give up on Fail, and if marriage was not an option, he wanted to be their disciple. Fail gave it a thought and then told him that she does not really understand the whole disciple thing, but she did not mind being just friends with him, and he was fine with that as well. In his mind, he was already her disciple, and he started addressing her as Master. Terry, acting like the mother of the whole group, was simply glad to see that all of them were getting along so well. Koritoko requested them to spend the night at his house as well, and Rest agreed to take him up on that offer and stay for the night, which made him very excited because that way he could be with his big sisters a little longer. Unicorn was listening to their conversation from outside as well, and since they were all staying over, he decided to do the same, but in reality he just wanted to be with all those women. Agni called him out for that, and he responded that all this time, all he could do was just watch. That's why he also had plenty that he wished to talk about with all of them. Rest also understood his perspective and just casually commented that they could use his long-winded talk as a perfect substitute for a lullaby, which really hurt his feelings. With that said, all the ladies and Koritoko took their leave and wished the gents a good night. The holy beast finally realized what was happening and that he was going to be stuck with Rest and Van. That was clearly not what he was hoping for, but now he was stuck with them. The next day, Rest got to hear the stories from the village chief about this island, how long it had been since this village was established, and if there was anyone else besides Astoria and Van who had come from outside the island. In return, he also told them that he had come to this island as its lord, and then he learned that this village was in fact a settlement of those who had fled persecution by the pure-blood elves. He thanked the village chief for telling him so much about this island and its people, and he expressed that from there on out, he wanted to investigate this island to learn more about it, but for that, he wanted to have his cooperation as well, and the chief assured him that he would be happy to help him out. He decided to start off his investigation by first checking out the cove where Astoria landed at, and so he asked her if she could guide him, and of course she was on board with his plan. Van also added that the cove was quite beautiful, and they could even swim there, which made Fail really excited, while Terry remained logical and reminded Rest that they must return back on time, otherwise Keda would start worrying about them, and he agreed. But then Koritoko offered to go and tell Keda that they all would be coming home late. He understood how important this investigation was for all of them, and besides, he also wanted to thank them for helping him out the other day, so this was the least he could do. Rest appreciated that a lot, but at the same time, he could not really allow him to go alone. Suddenly, Unicorn popped out from the window once again and asked if Keda was a woman. Without even hearing out the whole thing, he decided to take this role upon himself and accompany Koritoko. He quickly told him to get on his back, and he flew away straight towards the mansion, promising that he would deliver their message. With that out of the way, the rest of them decided to head out as well and proceed with their investigation. Later on, the group arrived outside the cave that led to the cove from where Astoria and her brother arrived on this island. Rest still could not believe that such a place existed, about which even the survey team did not know, and he just could not wait to start investigating it. As they went inside, it was pretty dark, and the whole place was like a maze, but Van assured them that they did not need to worry about getting lost because he remembered the way clearly. He led them to the place from where he and his sister first arrived on this island, and there was a lake. The girls decided to use that chance, and they all changed into their swimsuits and went swimming to have some fun. Astoria asked Rest what he thought about her outfit, and he told her that she looked very cute. As a matter of fact, he complimented everyone and said that they all looked great, but Agni, on the other hand, seemed a bit nervous since she was not really good at swimming either. Astoria asked him if he would like to swim with them as well, but he did not have the time to do that, as he wanted to finish the investigation of this cove first. She wanted to help him out as well, and since that was the case, he gave her and Agni a small task. The three of them began the investigation, and he noticed that there were some fishes in the lake as well, which really surprised him. He guessed that the fountain vent which was across the lake must be what the village chief mentioned, and Astoria briefed him that the vent sometimes sucks seawater and fishes up into this lake. Just like her and her brother, and even the half-elves as well, they were all being carried here from the sea. Rest was simply surprised to see that the great maelstrom of Nault was connected there, while Astoria added that it was called an inlet, but it only went one way. Rest realized that the whole thing was working differently from an ordinary fountain, and he wondered if some mysterious power was at work in this fountain spring. With that in mind, he decided to inspect it right away and brought out a machine to do just that. Curious, Agni asked him what that tool was, and he informed her that it was a spatial magic power meter that he received from the village chief. Apparently, it belonged to the Enhanced Kingdom survey team, but since it was broken, he fixed it with craft skill, and the chief said that he could just keep it. However, she could not understand why the village chief had something that the kingdom's survey team was carrying and how exactly he got his hands on it. He explained to her that 3 members of the expedition that had this were injured and were separated on the island. When the recall order came from the country, their comrades returned and left the 3 of them stranded on this island. It was said that they were taken in by the people of Udara village, and they ended up settling there. This tool was basically their keepsake, and that's how it got there. Astoria also mentioned that the descendants of that expedition were the Kalis, which was Koritoko's family, and Rest understood that that's why he and his group were accepted by the villagers. Normally, it was not that easy, since people of the kingdom were naturally regarded with suspicion, and he recalled that he had heard from the half-elf village chief why they were persecuted. There were 2 groups of elves, the Pure Blood faction and the Intermarriage Promotion faction. The Pure Blood faction were the long-lived elves who rejected intermarriage. Meanwhile, the Intermarriage faction, on the other hand, were the ancestors of the half-elves who emigrated abroad and prospered by leaving descendants. The long-lived elves feared that their race would eventually dwindle, and so they split up. Over time, the Mixed Marriage faction gave rise to half-elves who were short-lived and had little magical power, while the Purity faction elves discriminated against those short-lived, low-magic half-elves. They claimed that half-elves were nothing more than slaves of the elves, and they began applying diplomatic pressure on the surrounding nations, demanding their surrender. Rest country was no exception to that either, and under that pressure, it was decided that any confirmed half-elf would be handed over to them immediately. Considering all that, he speculated that the village leaders of Udara must have steeled themselves for the day they would have to face citizens of the kingdom. They reached this island seeking freedom from discrimination, but since this land was the kingdom's territory and Rest had now been appointed as the lord of this island, from now on, they were all his subjects. At the same time, he understood that he could not really say that to them either. To begin with, he too had come to this island in search of freedom, and he could not just take away their freedom and rule over them. Hence, the question remained how he should interact with the half-elves without disrupting their lives, but right now, he could not really think of anything. Agni believed in him and was sure that he would be able to come up with something, while Astoria also told him that he seemed like a kind ruler who cared deeply for his people. He thanked both of them for their compliment. Just then, Fail and Van called out to him and showed him the fishes that they had caught. Terry suggested that they should start making their food, and Agni went to work to grill the fishes. As they all sat together to eat, Van asked him if he was able to learn anything with that measuring device, and he shared with them that the magical energy that was in this cove was actually far higher and more dangerous than what the elders had said. Van wasn't sure why it was dangerous, since magical energy was supposed to be a blessing for the elves, and he explained to him that for those who could not control strong magic, it was like being drunk on strong liquor. Since he and the rest of them could not use magic, they could not sense anything at all, but the fact remained that it was quite dangerous. He wanted to report this to the village chief right away, and they decided to head back after finishing the food. Later, when he returned to the village, he informed the village chief about his findings, and he thanked him for looking into it on their behalf. The chief also stated that he and his people had no problem becoming his subjects, and that left him a bit shocked for a moment. He asked the chief if he was sure they should be deciding something like that so easily, and he simply responded that for his people, who were being pursued by the entire world, there was no place left to go. They had already resolved themselves for this day to obey if a lord came from the enhanced kingdom. However, if the lord turned out to be a tyrant, they were also prepared to put up a fight. Fortunately, he was not one of them, and that's why they had no problem following him. Rest promised that he would not become a tyrant to them. The chief shook his hand and looked forward to working with him from now on, and Rest felt the same way as well. Meanwhile, Koritoko was out there, riding on Unicorn's back, and they finally landed outside the mansion. Koritoko was really impressed seeing how insanely fast the holy beast was in the sky, while he, on the other hand, was only concerned with meeting Keda because, in his mind, he still believed that it was a woman. Keda came outside, and he asked Koritoko if Rest and the others were not with him, while the holy beast kept on searching for Keda, wondering where she was. But then, Keda introduced himself to him, and as soon as he heard his name, he realized that the person he was so excited to meet was, in fact, a 65-year-old man, and that left him utterly shocked. Koritoko, on the other hand, excitedly told him that he had brought some news on behalf of Rest. They went inside, and he briefed him that the others had gone to investigate the cove, and they just wanted him not to worry about them. Keda understood that, but whatever the case, he still could not believe that they had actually met a holy beast on their travels. Just being in the same room with him, he could feel that the atmosphere he carried was indeed different. He asked the beast if he could share some of his stories with him, and the beast asked him back if he was serious that he wanted to listen to his tales. Keda nodded, and the two of them started sharing their life stories, while Koritoko was surprised to see that they were actually getting along so quickly. Later at night, Rest and the group finally returned to the mansion, and Keda welcomed all of them. Rest immediately asked him if there was anything unusual that happened while he was away, and he answered that there was one thing that happened, and that was he had ended up talking quite a bit with the holy beast. He had a truly meaningful time with him and was even able to hear a lot of valuable stories from him. Rest was happy to hear that Unicorn finally opened up to someone, and he mentioned that he actually had a lot of things on which he wanted Keda's advice. However, before he could go into details, Terry asked them to be silent since Koritoko was sleeping right there and suggested they could continue this over some tea. Rest agreed, and Agni, like always, went ahead to prepare the meal for all of them. As they all sat down to eat, he brought up that he actually wanted to make a road leading straight to the village so that the holy beast might be able to come to them instantly. Plus, if they could freely go back and forth between the village and the mansion, they could eat fresh vegetables that were grown in the village every day, and on top of that, they could also meet with Van, Koritoko, and Astoria without any hesitation. Hence, that was one of the main matters that he wanted to discuss with Keda and wanted his advice. The bridge he had in mind was not just any ordinary bridge. Instead, he wanted to build it in the air to avoid harming the forest, and he asked him if something like that was possible. Keda was a bit taken aback hearing such an idea and requested him to give him one night so that he could look into various literatures and then get back to him. The next morning, Keda had prepared just the blueprint that he needed to create the bridge up in the air, and he was surprised to see that it looked just like he had imagined. He scanned the blueprint, and using the materials that he had saved up all this time, he started off by building the bridge's foundation. This was the first time the holy beast was witnessing his gift in action, and he noticed that he was absorbing the soil around him to make a hole. Keda told him that his observation was indeed right and stated that this was where his crafting skill truly shined. As he continued to build it, Koritoko was really impressed with his abilities and asked him if he was finished already. He answered that at the end of the day his abilities were limited as well, and that's why he was just repeating the same pattern for now and had reached the extent of what he could create while standing there. Terry and Agni were cheering him on as well, and they were ready to do anything to lend him a hand. A few minutes later, he was done with creating the foundation, and even the holy beast commented that at first, he was thinking that he was just a vague person, but witnessing all this, he realized that he could get things done whenever it mattered. Rest thanked him for the compliment, but he also knew that the first part was not a compliment. With that said, he proceeded to finish up the rest of the bridge, and just a few moments later, he was finally done with it. The bridge that connected his mansion and Utaro village had been completed, and people had already started moving across it. They even began trading on that bridge, where Agni gave some of her pancakes to a trader so that she could get some fresh vegetables from their village. Another man then came up to Rest's office, and he requested him to fix his house that had been destroyed. It turned out his clients were none other than Astoria and Van, and they had just come there to see him, nothing more than that. Meanwhile, a group of 3 men were hiding in the bushes, observing the bridge that had been created out of nowhere so quickly, and they wondered what exactly was going on there. Later on, Agni was teaching Astoria how to make sweets, but she wasn't really familiar with how to cook and only ended up making a mess when she squeezed the cream too tightly, and it went all over the place. She apologized to Agni and started to think that making sweets was really difficult, especially since beastmen like her had twice the strength of a normal human, and performing delicate work was quite the challenge. She even got a little emotional, as she believed that this way she won't be able to become a suitable bride for Rest. Since her strength was the problem here, Agni suggested that she should start by learning how to make bread instead of sweets, since bread required quite a bit of strength to knead the dough. She believed that it might be suitable for her, and Astoria could not wait to try that out. As they started making the bread, she was able to do it quite nicely, and Agni also added that Rest would surely be happy with this because he actually liked bread a lot. Astoria just wanted to become good at cooking because, one day, she aimed to be Rest's wife, and just thinking about him praising her cooking, she could not control her excitement, and yet again, she exerted too much strength and ended up breaking stuff, making a mess out of the kitchen. Just then, Terry came up to her, and seeing how she was struggling so much with cooking, she suggested a change of pace and asked her if she would like to make perfumes with her. Astoria wasn't really sure how that would help her get close to Rest, but then Terry told her that perfumes were very essential when going out on a date with a gentleman. That's why it was quite useful to be able to blend their own favorite scent, and as soon as she heard the word date, her unidirectional mind shifted completely towards perfume, and she agreed to learn from her. Terry showed her the one that she had created just recently, and it had a sweet and refreshing scent that was centered around floral notes. She believed that it was a fragrance which perfectly suited someone so lovely like Astoria. With that said, she proceeded to the teaching part and decided to make another one. She requested her to crush some of those petals for her, and as soon as she grabbed those flowers, Astoria noticed that they smelled very nice, so she asked her what kind of an image this perfume had. She answered that it was the scent of an adult. To be more specific, one could smell this type of scent when they were on a date with a gentleman and were completely alone together. Hearing all that, she just started smiling and she looked forward to learning more about perfumes. But of course, yet again, she was too strong for such things and broke everything. So at last she went to Fail, who was in charge of the laundry duties, and vented how she was not able to perform any basic task because of how strong she was and was only ending up breaking stuff. Fail also felt bad for her, and because her power was the main issue there, she asked her if she would like to help her carry the laundry, and she did not mind that. Besides, heavy lifting was just the thing that she was good at, and she demonstrated just that as she picked the bucket full of clothes without even breaking a sweat. Fail thanked her, while she, on the other hand, just wanted to do more and be of more help. Since that was the case, Fail gave her the task of folding the clothes as well, and first up, she gave her Rest's shirt. The moment she got her hands on his shirt, she started imagining all sorts of weird ideas, which only made her more excited, and obviously, once again, she got carried away and straight up ripped that shirt in half. Later, she and the three maids sat together, and she apologized to each one of them for not being able to help at all, let alone only increasing their problems, but they assured her she did not need to worry about all that. In fact, Agni was able to bake some bread from the dough she had kneaded earlier, and she served it to her. Fail also assured her that Rest wouldn't get mad either, just because his clothes were torn, since he could fix it with his craft anyway. Just then, Rest and Van entered the room as well, and they were also feeling very hungry. Astoria went blank for a moment after seeing him, and he asked her if something was wrong, but she got really embarrassed, so Fail stepped up for her and explained to him everything that had happened since this morning. After understanding the whole situation, Rest did not think Astoria not knowing how to cook or do laundry was that big of a deal, because after all, she was the princess of the Gorav kingdom, and it was common for a lady like her to not be familiar with that sort of work. But then Terry added that a lady always wants to do anything for the man she loves, even if it includes basic chores like cooking and laundry, because imagining the joy of the person they love brings her happiness. Van already knew that his sister's imagination could be a bit too wild sometimes, while Fail asked Rest if he could make a tool for her that won't break even if she applies force to it. Agni also agreed that it was a good idea because, at this rate, soon they won't have enough pots and tools left. Rest understood their point and checked his inventory, but he only had regular wood and iron as materials, which would definitely not be enough to make a sturdy tool that won't break. So like always, he ran to Keda for advice, and he suggested that they should use mithril as a material to make unbreakable tools. Rest had never heard about it, so he briefed him that mithril was a precious mineral which one could not find so easily, and acquiring it was quite difficult. Suddenly, Van recalled hearing about something like that in his village just the other day, and he was sure that the village chief must have some information on it. Since that was the case, the group decided to head out and search for the mithril, all so that Astoria's journey as a bride could continue. As they were on their way to the village using the newly built bridge, Rest and Astoria were actually treating this little adventure like they were out on a date, and he asked Keda why he was tagging along on the same carriage as them when it was supposed to be a special date just for the two of them. Keda bluntly reminded him that the main purpose of this trip was to investigate Mithril, not a date. Rest was not too worried about it and stated that calling such a simple mission research was just an exaggeration, since they only needed it to make sturdy cooking utensils. However, Keda then questioned him if he had any idea what the value of a single plate made of mithril silver was. Apparently, it was enough for a family of 4 to live comfortably for a month, and that's why, if they could excavate it, he was certain that it could become a valuable resource for this island, which would help them financially as well and would be a major factor in securing this island's future. But Rest, on the other hand, was acting like a kid and was not even paying attention to what he was saying, which really annoyed Keda. Later on, they finally arrived at Udara village and met up with Koritoko and his father. Since it was said that mithril was found during the exploration of a cave in the inlet in the village, they all headed towards that location. Mithril was an ore that was said to repel magic, which made it very effective against magical creatures, but since the half-elves living in the village could no longer use magic, they said it was fine to excavate, and they did not mind that. As the group ventured deeper into the cave, Rest brought up that this place felt just like a test of courage. Astoria had no idea what he was talking about, so he explained to her that there was a place in his territory where one could wander through a dark mansion, and they scare the guests who enter the mansion with a ghost that was made from magic. Fail gave her a live demonstration by sneaking up on her from behind and booing her, which actually startled her a bit too much. Since the cave was so dark, Rest suggested to her that the two of them could hold hands if she wanted, and of course she wanted to do that. They both held each other's hand and started moving forward, and Astoria was just worried if she was holding his hand too tightly, but he told her he was completely fine. Seeing the way he was treating Astoria, Keda called out to him, and out of nowhere, he asked him if he had had any experiences with girlfriends while he was attending the academy. Rest answered that he had had a lot of girlfriends back when he was at the academy, and Keda was quite surprised to hear that, as it showed how different he was from his brother Bergs. Rest simply laughed about it and said that his younger brother was very well behaved. A few moments later, they finally arrived at the spot, and Keda mentioned that when the half-elf ancestors landed on this island, they dug a hole from the cove. In the records, it was said that they attempted to develop the area. However, there were several places along the way where mining magic did not work, and they just gave up. Of course, the reason why mining magic was not working there was because the rocks contained mithril, and so Rest decided to begin and find out if they could still find some mithril. He used his craft skill, and in the blink of an eye, he created a big hole in the wall in front of him, sucking in all the rocks and everything that was in them. He checked his inventory, and it turns out he had actually absorbed some mithril as well, along with the earth walls, and Keda was yet again amazed by this gift that was given to him by the gods. Fail then noticed that there was another cave beyond this hole that he had just created, and they all decided to explore a bit further ahead as well. As they explored the new cave, they found that it was more like a secret storage, and there were different types of utensils there that were made out of mithril alloy. They wondered if someone was actually living there, when suddenly Rest heard something. He pointed the light towards the noise, and a bearded old man came out from the shadows, which left all of them terrified as they thought that it was a bearded ghost. The old man began chasing after them with a shovel in his hand while they all ran away from him. However, Keda noticed that the language he was speaking was different, and he realized what exactly was going on. He stood firmly in front of the old man, and all of a sudden, he started tap dancing in front of him, which left everyone else quite confused. To their surprise, the old man started tap dancing as well, and it was like they were communicating that way. Later, when the old man finally calmed down, Keda explained to them that that was actually Dwarven language. The tap dance was just a form of greeting in their language, and since some of his old adventure companions were well versed in that language, he ended up remembering some of it as well. Although he was not well versed himself to engage in a conversation deeply, he was at least able to convey that they meant no harm. Rest then noticed that there was a half-broken plate on a table that was half-broken as well, and he finally understood what happened. The reason why the old man was angry at him was because this place was his house, and he had absorbed parts of it and broke that plate of his, which was very valuable. To make that right, he used his craft skill to bring out the broken piece from his inventory, and he fixed the plate, making it just like brand new. That made the old man really happy, and since he did not seem angry with him anymore, he wondered if he was free to leave. But then, he started staring at Rest with sparkling eyes and he had no idea what he was trying to say. He gave him a statue made of mithril, and Keda understood what he was trying to say. Dwarves were known to be the fairies of craftsmanship, and every dwarf had a master. It was also said that they become full-fledged by creating works that imitate their master's statue in mithril, and this statue was precisely one of them. Rest wasn't too sure if he should accept such an important thing from him, and Keda stated that they could just use it as another source of mithril. And so, they finally came out of the cave and returned back to Koritoko's house. Koritoko and his father were just surprised to hear that there were actually dwarves living down there, and they wondered if they were actually living there even before them, to which Keda replied that dwarves were known for not settling down in just one place. With that said, Rest crafted a tool made of mithril especially for Astoria and handed it over to her. She was very excited to test out if she could finally use a tool without breaking it. However, with just a little bit of her strength, she broke that plate as well, and all of them just stood there, confused. Like always, Keda understood what had gone wrong there, and he explained to them that what Rest had created was not a mithril alloy. The result of his crafting skill had sorted the iron, which was included in the mithril alloy. They removed the impurities and refined only the high-purity mithril silver, which was actually very impressive. Since that was the case, he believed that with this island and Rest power, they could, in fact, acquire the highly valuable mithril silver, which would become a resource for the Kurl territory and would tremendously help their financial status as well. Rest was not really interested in doing all that because it would be quite the hassle, and besides, he also pointed out that even if that underground cave was a mithril mine, he did not want to just keep on digging, not when there was a dwarf living there and calling that place his home. Putting himself in his shoes, he could understand that if he was a lone dwarf down there, he would just want to take things easy, and Keda did not argue any further. A few days later, the maids were chilling in the common area, and Terry was acting all weird, doing that classic thing where she plucked out the petals from a flower to decide whether the other person was in love with her or not. Fail and Agne had no clue what was going on with her when Rest entered the room as well, and he asked Terry if she could make some tea for him. Fail offered to make the tea on her behalf, and he did not really mind that, but he also noticed that Terry was acting quite weird, and he asked Agne if she had any idea what had happened to her. She told him that it was just the other night when Terry went outside to gather some herbs, and she saw a mysterious man in the bushes. She introduced herself to him and asked him who he was, but the man did not answer. Instead, he requested her to just forget that she ever saw him there. He was certain that they would not be meeting again, and with that said, he just ran away from there. She tried to stop him, but he did not listen, and as he disappeared into the woods, she wondered if it was just an illusion. However, ever since the moment she saw that man's face and his long hair, she was feeling this excitement in her heart. So coming back to the present, that was the reason why she was blushing so hard the whole day. Rest was surprised to hear that such a thing had happened right outside the mansion. However, he could not really think of a man present on this island who looked like that, and Agne was also wondering if such a person even existed. But Terry was sure that it was not just an illusion, so there was that. As proof, she was even holding on to the button that the man dropped, and it basically confirmed that she had fallen hard for that pretty boy. Just then, Astoria also arrived on the scene, and there was no way she was going to miss out on a romantic story. She asked her for more details. Later on, Agne was at the barn, taking care of the birds, and it turned out she had finally gotten quite close to them. Even though they had grown a lot, they were still as cute as ever. Suddenly, she noticed a man sneaking around there, and she immediately called him out, questioning him who he was. It was the same man Terry had fallen for, and it turned out it was actually Keda, who had changed his appearance. Agne was able to recognize him right away and asked him if he had used a rejuvenation gift. He answered that he did. Ever since he started serving Eliza, this was the first time he had rejuvenated himself, and for some reason, now he could not return to his original state. He tried to use it in the shadows, thinking that if he became a little younger, he would be able to handle physical labor. Plus, his gift had not been working well for quite a while now. Just then, the unicorn arrived there as well and stated that his gift must have gone out of control. It was something that often happens to older humans, and he had seen many cases like that. Keda was surprised to see that, for once, he was actually being knowledgeable. The holy beast suggested that since he was going to be stuck in this form for a while now, he should go ahead and enjoy his young appearance. He, on the other hand, was still worried that this would interfere with his duties, so he decided to go straight to Rest and first explain this whole situation to him and the others. However, Agni and the holy beast stopped him and told him that what Terry saw the other night was this form of his, using the gift. If she were to find out that it was Keda who she had fallen in love with, she would fall into deep sorrow. Of course, nobody wanted to see such a cheerful person like her in that state, so the holy beast advised him that until his real form returned, he should hide himself. However, just then Terry and the others arrived there as well, and the moment she saw him standing there in front of her, her heart skipped a beat. She told Rest that this was the man she was talking about, and as the lord of this island, he formally welcomed him to Eldoba Island. But then Agni interrupted them and informed them that this person in front of them was actually Keda, and there was a reason why he was looking like this. Rest did not listen to her and straight up refused to believe that this man was Keda because, to begin with, there was no way he could be so young. Agni thought to herself, how come nobody was able to recognize him? They took him inside, and Agni and Unicorn just stood there as the only ones who were aware of the fact that it was Keda. Since there was nothing they could really do about it now, they decided to just watch how things unfold. Back inside, as the whole group sat together to have some tea, Rest finally began to wonder where exactly Keda had disappeared to. He expressed that to him. He was an indispensable and very important family member, and it was not like him to disappear so suddenly without even saying anything. Those words hit Keda really hard, as he realized how much the young lord cared for him. Just then, Terry offered to make some snacks for all of them. She grabbed the jar of jam, but was not able to open it, so she went to Keda and asked him if he could help her with that. Van, being oblivious to the situation, stated that it would be a piece of cake for Astoria, who immediately punched him in the guts to shut him up, and said that she was too delicate to open a tight jar. She basically wanted Terry to have her moment. Keda agreed to help her out and open the jar for her, while Astoria commented that the two of them looked really good together. Agni and Unicorn, watching from the background, could tell that he seemed to be enjoying it as well, and she just hoped that nothing bad would happen to him while being the center of attraction. But then suddenly, she noticed that his hand was returning to normal. Not just that, half of his face was already back to normal, and the effects of his gift were disappearing. At this rate, she was worried that they would not be able to protect Terry's dream, and she tried to think of a way out. She looked at the holy beast and asked him what they should do now. Without a care in the world, he simply said out loud that the magic was wearing off. Everyone present in the room got confused. They asked him what he was talking about, but that was enough for Keda to realize that he was talking to him, so he got up and thanked Terry for the pancakes. She asked him if he was leaving already and expressed that she would really like it if he could stay with them for at least a day. However, Rest interrupted her and told her that if she forced him to stay with them like that, his family and the villagers might worry about him. He also wanted to get to know him better, both as a lord and as a friend. So he turned to him and said that if he ever feels like talking, he was free to visit them anytime he liked. Seeing such a pure smile on his face, Keda simply smiled back, and he promised that one day he would surely come back to them. With that, he left the mansion, and as he and the holy beast walked through the forest, he shared with him that he did not really have good memories with this gift of his, which could turn him younger. When he was young, using the gift would just turn him into a child, so it was only useful for fitting into tight spaces. In fact, this gift often caused conflicts with his adventurer companions. They expelled him from the party because they found a more capable adventurer who could use better gifts. Even when he tried to plead with the people he once called friends, they turned their backs on him and simply said that he should use that gift of his to do things more skillfully. But today, for the first time, he felt that this gift actually helped him in some ways, as he was able to see Rest's face as a lord, and it made much more sense how he was able to interact with the half-elves. He recalled back the time when Eliza had entrusted him with her son, saying that she wanted him to tell her son the tales of his adventure, and to this day, he was determined to fulfill his duties to him admirably. Later, when the effects of his gift wore off completely, he finally returned back to the mansion, and everyone welcomed him back, asking him where he had gone off to. He just apologized to them for worrying them. Terry offered to take his coat from him, and he thanked her for that. But then when she held his coat in her hands, she noticed that there was a button missing, and she wondered where he had lost it.